Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's installment of ClueCon Weekly, sponsored by SignalWire. Here with me, I have Rob Kurver, founder at The Next Cloud and speaker at many conferences across the world. Thank you, Rob, for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Luca.
Would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Well, briefly. That's always a challenge, right? Briefly.
Not briefly. If you have a lot, it's even better.
Well. So I have a background as a developer. A long time ago, I started my first company when I was 15 years old, and then moved into management and marketing and sales and entrepreneurship, I guess, over the years. I got involved with the telco space or communication space back in 2004, when I was the founder of one of the first hosted voice providers here in the Netherlands. And this was before the word hosted voice even existed, right? And before we had UCaaS and CPaaS and all these things that we're going to be talking about later. So I did that for a couple of years, and for the past 10 years, I've been a consultant in this space. So I work a lot with providers of this sort of new technology, and with also telcos, who I think are in an ideal place to do more with this new technology, if only they start to understand the opportunities and the way to work with it.
Yeah.
And then on the side, I do events. I organize events. I organized a couple of API events over the years. I did Europe for the Cloud Communications Alliance for a couple of years, and started last year here in the Netherlands or in Europe with the SmartCom Summit, which is also about this whole concept of smart communication, smart companies, how technology can help us move into this, the next normal.
I think that is that's a very, very common discussion. And to that point, I went through your blog posts, as I usually do, and I see you have done a lot on the topic of contextual communications, right, which is a topic that's very dear to myself too, because I've done a lot of work in that area, and we're trying to push some products that are aimed specifically at that kind of usage. So what do you think contextual communications actually is in the current industry, and how could we go towards that? Because it does mean a lot of things to different people.
Yeah, it does mean a lot of things to different people. I like that you picked up on the word contextual communications, and not so much on CPaaS, which is a crazy acronym, of course. I think of contextual communications as embedded communications, right? We're at a point in time where all sorts of communications can be embedded into IT platforms and applications, and it becomes part of what we do instead of something alongside of what we do, as it used to be a few years ago. So typical examples: Uber. If you call a cab, if you want to talk to the driver, there's a button in the app, or there's a text message, or a chat possibility within the app. You don't go around it, and I think that's just so much more logical. It makes for an easier user experience. And it's interesting that nowadays, that used to be the domain of digital natives, the Ubers of this world, Airbnb, Facebook, the tech giants. But nowadays, what's interesting is that it's happening in our normal lives, right? When my parents need to get a doctor's report, need to see a doctor for an appointment, we're getting to the point that they don't have to go to the hospital anymore, because they get an app, they have something, communication is embedded. They don't have to worry about installing something or getting the right version of whatever app we like to use. And I think this is a big thing, right? As geeks, we sort of know how to put everything together ourselves, but normal people, let's say the other 90-80% of the population in this world, we need to make it easy for them. And I think that's really exciting about this time, that's happening, and there are tech providers making it possible, and integrators starting to get there.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. So what I was thinking about is, do you think contextual communications also fits into areas where normally you wouldn't see anything? Like, I don't know, I was recently playing with a prototype of having someone help you write in an e-commerce website. So you're buying something, you're not sure about something, maybe it's expensive, and you can just call someone in there, and there's a person able to answer and help you right from the browser. They have your history at their fingertips, so they know what you saw, they know what you bought, and maybe they can do recommendations. It sounds like it will also be a way to re-involve some workforces that have been, diminished by the amount of those last personal contact. There's a lot. So far, I haven't seen much of that. You think there's any reason why?
Well, I think we're sort of struggling to find the right use cases, right? And we moved from, as with a lot of new technology, you have that peak of in the hype cycle. You have that peak where everybody talks about it, and then we go through a trough of disillusionment, and then slowly we see things get embedded. I think we're getting there, right? So it's becoming more and more normal, and it's really I like the way you put it. It's about the use case. It's not about the technology. The technology is there. We know it, right? It's been around for a couple of years. We have WebRTC since a few years as a standard. It's there. And now what we need is, I think, developers that take this core technology and start to develop user-friendly, real-world, useful applications. As I just mentioned, the example of hospital, that used to be a no-go area, right, for a long time because of a million reasons. And last year, all of a sudden, because of this little virus, we see that it's actually possible. People like it, and it gets adopted. And I think then very quickly we move from it never existed to, hey, it's normal.
Yeah, true.
I think that change then happens really quickly, but it will be vertical by vertical. It will be use case by use case until we see it everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. People, I think the forced adoption that we had to have, because people just had to start using video conferencing, has helped move the line on contextual communications too. Because now people do expect things that weren't there before. They're not even normal, but they're actually. Why don't we have something like the? I was talking to a social network founder few weeks ago, well, actually last week, and we're thinking how people don't really are asking for things like clubhouse style interaction. So I have my friends, 3 or 4 of us, who just join a call right into the browser, just chat for 10 minutes about whatever, or I do make it open, like, here, let's meet up and chat about, I don't know, Bitcoin. And everybody that joins just talks to you, and people notice. They've been asking, like, people come up to companies and say, "Why don't you have a communication of sorts?"
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think that's also the tricky part, right? You mentioned Clubhouse that didn't exist a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and then it hyped, and I think it's now, I don't know where it's going and whether it's going to survive, and whether we'll still be clubhousing 2 years from now, or whether it's a short-term hype. We're looking for these applications, right? These solutions that are going to stick around. And maybe it's a fact of life that they'll have a shorter lifespan in many cases. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no way. You're right. The real use case is probably not really that important. The actual use case, so the actual how you build apps, it's that people are starting to get into the point where they think they can do this.
Yes.
Which does lead me into another interesting question. As you know, ClueCon Weekly is part of our ClueCon circuit of conferences. And last year, like everybody else, we had to do a remote conference. This year, we're having a hybrid event in October because we couldn't make it in August like it's usually. And you have a lot of experience with organizing conferences and as a speaker. What do you think has changed in the last year or so? And can we go back to the old mode? Because I see people, like, I do webinars and I have 60-70 people on. I usually they're very technical stuff, like I'm an engineer, so when I do very technical stuff for SignalWire, I used to have 15-20 people, and most of them were engineers. Right now I have 70-80 people, and half of them are engineers. Others are just there to see what can be done with technology. So do you think we're actually going back to in-person conferences eventually, or is it here to stay?
I hope so. I hope so. No, I think So what happened is last year we were actually planning a traditional conference, and then Corona hit, right? So we were forced in last year in June to do our SmartCom Summit online, and we did another one a couple weeks ago. And it's been quite a journey, because it's a thing, right? To organize a conference online. A webinar is one thing.
Yeah.
A conference is something else. It's more complicated. It's got different rules. We had in our last one, we had about 400 registrations, and then we had about 2,000 viewers, because we did part of it on an online platform and part was just streamed on social. So we were pretty happy with that. But it's so hard. It's so hard to get people's attention nowadays, because I don't know about you, but I'm in Teams or Zoom meetings typically between 6 and 14 hours a day. Right?
Yeah, we are on this platform, which is Signal Wire Work, which is, I mean, it's a virtual office, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's effectively.
So it's our life, right? Right now we're
Yeah.
online all the time, and then you're organizing a conference or an event or a webinar. And you tell people, why don't you come and watch this and join us and have a chat? It's so difficult to get people's attention, I find. Also myself, I skip most of the conferences that I used to want to go to nowadays, because I'm just too busy. And I don't want to go, if I'm already working online all the time, I don't want to go to an online event at the end of the day on top of it. So I find that I'm lazy. I register and then I wait for the post-event videos, which I can then watch when I feel it's appropriate, or if I think that some of the stuff is interesting, and I can fast forward. But it's a totally different experience. So what I'm missing out on, and what we're missing out on by not having these physical events, is the chance encounters, right? It's going someplace, blocking your calendar, being stuck in a room with hopefully some interesting content, but certainly a lot of interesting people. All that stuff is sort of taken away, or most of it is taken away in an online event. And we did our best in our event. I think we succeeded pretty well by having sort of mimicking the conference experience. So there's the lobby, and there's meeting, and there's online chat, and there's polls and everything. But that again is so much work, which normally would be, hey, we're all stuck in this room, we're in this building, and let's see what happens. And the fun part. So that's the thing that I miss the most right now. It's the fun part, meeting people, old friends, new friends, getting introduced to each other. That's so much harder online. But of course, the on the plus side, everything gets recorded nowadays, so you can watch it back. So the whole long tail is interesting, and it's interesting to develop new formats from that. But that's, I think, the challenge that we as an industry, as an event industry, now have. How do you develop interesting, exciting formats that people want to watch and that you can hook people on, basically?
Yeah, it feels like so talks are important. I don't mean this in many demeaning way. I've been a speaker at many conferences, and talks are always interesting, but the conference experience is not just about the talks. Like there's 3 or 4 speeches you really look forward to when you go to a conference. Generally speaking, I mean, this is in my case, there's those 3 or 4 people you absolutely want to see because you're there almost for them. But then it's not about the actual. So recreating that part of the experience has been hard. So how did you try and do that? So you said you had a kind of a lobby, you had networking events. How did it play out? Did you maybe play games? I don't know. It's still ideas at this point.
Yeah, I think it's the ideas at this point. So the lessons that we learned, and also looking at myself, I'm lazy. I don't want to spend online. I don't want to spend 1 or 2 days online watching everything, right? So it needs to be a concise format. What we ended up doing is a short format, plenary session, some breakouts, a lot of polls, a lot of chat. We had people actually moderating the chats. We had some interesting speakers that people wanted to see, different moderators. And I think in what we decided to do was really focus on creating something that's different from an online webinar. So most of our sessions were actually either recorded live or broadcast live. We had some parallel tracks, right? So some were really live and some were pre-recorded. But most of them were actually done with people really sitting at a table together.
Oh, I see.
And I think this is something interesting. Um, we're having a pretty natural conversation right now, right?
Yeah.
Asking questions, giving answers. We didn't practice, or I mean, in that sense, it's live, and it feels like anything can go wrong, right? From here,
Yeah.
yeah, which is part of the fun. If you make it really live, that's really a cool thing, I think. But we're still talking to a screen. I'm still talking to my computer screen, and you're doing the same thing, and we're missing the body language, which is, if we're sitting here together, it's kind of okay. But if you're sitting with four, five, six people, I find it becomes quite artificial to look at these screens with
Mm.
four or five or six talking heads, right? You miss, you know what I mean? You miss the energy that you normally have when you sit together in a room. You miss the body
Yeah.
language. You miss the ability to manage the room. I have the same thing in workshops. As a consultant, I give workshops. I try to do that in person, or at least with part of the group in person, and some may be on screen. So this whole hybrid thing is, I think, the biggest challenge that we're going to need to work on the next couple of years to make that natural. But having people sitting at the same table with you is really different from looking at a screen. And somebody described to me a while ago that, well, it works pretty well, right? Working online. And
Mm.
for many things, it works great. I've been doing just like yourself. I mean, we've been using this technology for 5 or 10 years, whatever.
Yeah.
So it works. Um, but it doesn't work for everything. And for some kind of meetings, you get maybe 80% of the, let's say, performance or the effectiveness this way. And that's not always good enough. Sometimes you need 100% or 150% if you're in brainstorming or developing a new relationship, business development, setting up a new team. I think these are circumstances where you really want to be in the same room together, and you want to be able to feel that energy rather than looking at a screen. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge as we go forward now. Also for companies like Signalwire, right? To develop the platforms, to develop the experience where you can work online and offline in an ideal mode, where you get your brainstorming possibilities, where you get all sorts of new tools. I think it's going to be very exciting to see what will be developing to create an online offline a hybrid experience
Yeah.
that's better than what we used to have, because it used to be binary, right? It used to be either you were offline together at a conference, whatever, in a meeting room, or you were online. And I think now the big challenge is we'll be going back to some sort of existence with hybrid being the normal. People are going to be in the office some of the days, and they'll be at home or working
Some other
from
days.
remote
Yeah.
locations a couple of days. Um, and how are we going to support that? I think that's going to be really exciting to see what we all come up with.
How this feels like is that the what's going to improve in conferences is that you can have more speakers if you like, because people that are not
Yes.
able to travel or will not make it, maybe not as full talk, because if you have a conference in person, you probably want the main speakers to be there, of course, but it's going to be far easier to do things like, a round table with the three founders of a project,
Yeah.
where usually for some reasons you can only get 2 out of 3 every time, because one of
Yeah.
them, of course, have something else to do. The other thing I think I agree with is that in general, one person talks work better online as a streaming format than roundtable type of things. Roundtables really, I find borderline, they don't even work. Like if you had 3 or 4 people discussing a topic, we tried doing that in a few cases. We tried doing that in ClueCon Weekly. We added in other couple of situations. It just doesn't work right because the conversation doesn't flow, because you can't read what people are thinking.
Yeah.
It's difficult to tell, hey, this guy has something to, as a moderator, you see someone, you see someone is
Exactly.
ready to talk, like you say, oh,
Exactly.
hey, yeah, I want to say something. You can, body language tells you they're about to say something and it's important to them, so you pass them the torch. And it really, I wouldn't say it doesn't work online, but it's reduced to a kind of a school session. So you're just asking questions like, "What's your answer? What's your answer? What's your answer?" You got to C, you got to B. It's so weird. It's I totally agree with that. This is and what about audience engagement? Did you experiment with anything like, I don't know, polls? Because that's another problem. Like I used to start every, so I spoke about a Ruby framework we built and worked on for a long time, a lot of times, and every time I would just say, "Hey, do you know about adhesion? Please raise your hands if you use this. Please raise your hand if you're a Ruby programmer." Right now, even that is hard. So, how will you? Did you experiment with anything there?
Yeah. Well, we did polls and chat extensively throughout our online conferences. Um, Poll as a sort of a starting point, right? To get some opinions in, and then chat to follow up and to get the discussion going. And then we would also feed that back to the main room, basically, where the round table was being held in a real roundtable fashion, right? For the reasons
Yeah.
that you just explained. So we would have the interaction between the group that was sitting live at a table, 4, 5, 6 people, and the online audience that was asking questions and that was responding to things that were happening in the conversation. So that actually worked quite well as a way to bridge the, let's say, the group
Yeah.
discussion with the online audience. Yeah, we had great experience with that. I've seen people play games, right? It depends on what sort of conference you want to create. We also had a meeting carousel in our event. Now, personally, I hate them.
Mhm.
I don't like, if I'm on an online thing, I don't want to go to a meeting carousel. I love sitting in a real conference, sitting at the bar at the end and chatting with people, but online it's just not my thing. But a lot of people loved it, and I think that's also. I mean, you have to realize that not everybody that attends your conference is the same, right? Some people. So you need to have this diversity of engagement
Experience.
tools to give everybody a warm feeling. And the thing that I think we did quite well in our conference. Do you ever get that you walk into or you come into this conference and you're a little bit late, right? Because your day is packed and you're just in time, or you're 5 minutes late, and you sort of fall into this conference and you're in this environment that you've never been in before, or you're not using it every day, certainly. And you're not exactly sure where to go, and you feel a little bit lost. That's not a good start.
Yeah,
And it's
for sure.
and that's very similar to an offline conference, right? You want to be there in time. You want people to welcome you, to explain you where are all the buttons, what does it
Yeah.
do, and not once but 10 times, because it's complicated. I can barely remember where the leave button is in Teams or in Zoom, which I
Mhm.
use every day. So how am I supposed to know my way around this virtual online event platform if I don't use it every day? So taking the time to make people welcome, I think that's important. It also helps with the audience participation part. We need to make time to connect to people, even though they're remote.
So do kind of a pre-session where maybe you showed base
Yeah,
things, etc., which takes the place of the reception, like when you meet people
exactly.
at a conference. And
We
you're
did
right,
exactly that.
even
We did
offline,
exactly that. Yeah.
if you arrive late at a conference, you're going to spend the day catching up, because if you get
Yes.
there 10 minutes after the keynote has started, you barely have time to register. The people at the counter won't have time for you. They just hand you the badge and go in, and then you spend the rest of the day trying to find out where things are, which talks you want to go to, etc. So yeah, it's absolutely true. And I mean, I traveled from Europe to the US. I used to. I hope I get to travel again often, and I've gotten late to conferences quite a bit of times, because anything can happen when you travel.
Sure.
And you're right, it's important to make people welcome, engagement through chat and polls. Yeah, I think something that's always missing, and we should build as a tool. I'm taking a note as a developer, is building something in to do a quick poll, like maybe just a yes no thing, effectively raise your hand. having something that's right here in the interface, so I, as a speaker, can just type it in and hit go, and it gets asked to everybody in the attendance.
Yeah.
That will probably be a very good tool to add to conferencing
Yeah.
tool, because that's
Yeah.
you generally don't have complicated questions. Like, you're not going to type a five choice poll. It's mostly, hey guys, do you know Ruby? Yes, no. Then it helps you figure out where you're going to start.
Yeah.
You're right. It's absolutely. So do you think? But our conference is actually coming back. Do you have any live events planned for this year?
Yeah, I'm hoping to go to Barcelona for Mobile World, end of June or early July, and that's going to be exciting because I'm not sure if it's going to be ready. I'm hoping to go to Enterprise Connect end of the year. So I'm hoping we can go back to offline events. I'm hoping also that these events will evolve, right? So they become more hybrid somehow, because we'll have to. We'll have to. I don't think it's I don't think we're going to see 100,000 people walking in Barcelona 3 months from now for Mobile World. I mean, I think those days are gone. We're going to have smaller conferences, and there's going to be an online offline component, or there's going to be all sorts of variations. But
So
I
you think that's really
definitely
not coming back? Like the million people in Barcelona for,
I
or
don't
those couple 100,000 in Enterprise Connect at one point? Like, that was huge at some years.
It was huge. I don't think they're going to come back in the same way. I think people also expect more and more that they can watch it offline, online as well, right? If you can't do the traveling, certainly internationally or across continents, it's great if you can follow a conference online and still get part of the whole experience. So I think we're going to see more different formats there. There are advantages to the online experience.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's gonna change budgets for conferences. Like, less people means it's harder to negotiate with sponsors, even.
Yeah, true.
It's hard to explain the use case. You need numbers. The other end, though, if you have viewership numbers, those are easy to show. Like, I had
Yeah.
10,000 people watching last year, so we'd like to ask this X amount of money. Yeah, I think that's a very, very valid point. Well, that was a very good chat. Thank you so much. We went through a lot, and I hope conferences are coming back. I hope contextual communications picks up, and Rob can certainly help you as I can figure out where to go with your next integration. And well, Rob, thank you for being here with us, and thank everybody for watching.
Well, thank you, Luca, and hopefully next time in person somewhere, right?
Oh yeah,
With a beer.
Yeah, well, end of the year maybe at EC. I will certainly be there if it's actually possible to go. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'll be there too. Thanks.